Good evening, everyone. So we want to get started. I know some people are still coming in. I'm Tom Nagorski. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Asia Society. And for starters, I just want to thank everyone who is here tonight, everyone. We don't often program on holidays. People tell us nobody will come on a holiday. And then people, well, nobody tells us this, but you imagine that when it's 1 degree outside, nobody will come either. So we're delighted. We actually had planned to have this on our 8th floor upstairs, and it just was too overflow, so we've come to the auditorium. So thank you all. A particularly warm welcome to our guests who are here from the Chinese consulate here in New York, members of the press, and to Nick Platt in the back there, Ambassador Platt, the former president of the Asia Society. Delighted to have you here. And delighted also to the great turnout of young people. I don't think I'm sharing secrets when I say that the demographic of this institution here on the Upper East Side usually, let's just put it this way, I'm usually one of the youngest people at these events, and so I'm happy that we're skewing a little younger tonight. We have, as you may know, young people here from, I believe, 14 provinces and cities across China. And we're thrilled to have you here before you head back to China and celebrate the Chinese New Year with your families. We'd like to take this opportunity to not only thank you all, but extend our warmest wishes to you and your families. So from all of us, Yang Yan Kuai Le. And given that I got applause, I want to thank Jeff Wong and my daughter Natalie for helping me with that, so thank you. A few notes quickly before we start about events here at the Asia Society. We have, as you may have heard or read about, a major exhibition of Buddhist treasures from Myanmar that just opened last week. It is spectacular and groundbreaking, a lot of work that has never been seen outside that country. You don't have to take my word for it. It's getting rave reviews, including a big write-up in the New York Times just the other day. That's in our galleries and will be until early May. And several current events, current affairs programs that are coming up in the next week. Tomorrow night we have Kevin Rudd will be on this stage. With Charlie Rose. Kevin is the former Prime Minister of Australia, of course, and also, as of 2 weeks ago today, the new president of the Asia Society Policy Institute. Charlie Rose, I don't think needs any introduction, but you may not know, is now an Asia Society trustee, and I frankly do not know, because it's a holiday and we've had a long weekend, whether tickets are still available. You can check on your way out or on our website, and if they're not, we'll be webcasting, and Charlie is going to be taping that for an edition of the Charlie Rose Show. Next week, on the 25th of February, we have a top-flight panel here on security issues in Northeast Asia that involves China as well, but also Japan and Korea. And then the day after that, Nicholas Kristof, the New York Times columnist, will be here for a President's Forum series in conversation also on this stage with my colleague, the President of the Asia Society, Josette Sheeran. Now, obviously, all those events succeed if the people on the stage are great and skilled and smart communicators. Which seemed like a good segue to talk about what we're about to see and hear tonight, which is this event is really about some great and skilled and smart, not to put too much pressure on you, communicators from this country and from China. We have with us national debate champions from all those provinces and cities in China, and superstar debaters from the United States. I'll just say a few words before we begin about format. We will have, even though it says War of Words with high schoolers, just to be clear, this organization exists and was founded to build bridges between cultures, so we're not having this is not a U.S. versus China event. And I had nothing to do with this, but I have great admiration for whoever decided that the format of the debate, you will not see America here and China there. There will be an American debater and a Chinese young debater on one side, and another American and another Chinese debater on the other side. But they will be judged. The moderator of the debates will be David Weeks from the National High School Debate League of China. And our judges will be David and his colleague, Gavin Newton-Tanzer, my colleague, Orville Schell, the great scholar of China and U.S.-China relations. He is the Arthur Ross Director of the Asia Society Center on U.S.-China relations, and Michelle Choi and Daniel Tartakovsky, who are here from Harvard. Once the debate and the judging are done, we will have a panel discussion that Orville will moderate. And have your questions ready because he'll take those questions. And we always promise here, whatever we're doing, to do our best to get people out on time. So on or about 8 o'clock, you'll be out in the tundra again. Please now join me in a really warm welcome for David Weeks and for our 4 debaters from the United States and China. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm David Weeks, president of the National High School Debate League of China. It's my distinct pleasure to be here at the Asia Society to moderate this debate between 2 of our students and 2 of America's top debaters. I'd first like to thank the Asia Society for hosting us and hosting this event. Really, without their support and the support of Tom, Jeff, and Orville, this event really wouldn't be possible. So a big thank you to the Asia Society. I'd also like to thank all of the audience members for braving the tundra. Our students actually just came back from Boston, where it's actually very, very cold. And we just competed at the Harvard Debate Tournament as well as the University of Pennsylvania National Invitational Tournament. So not only are the debaters on stage that you're about to see, some of the best in China, but actually all of the audience members from the Chinese Debate League are some of the best in the country. They actually had to advance into the elimination rounds of their regional tournaments that we host in over 27 Chinese cities in order to be here today. So with that said, we'll now invite the debaters to the stage to have their seats and get ready. So while they're getting set up, maybe I can give you guys a little bit more context about the National High School Debate League of China and why our students are here. So the NHSDLC was founded 3 years ago. Our organization hosts debate tournaments across China in 27 cities. We actually travel to about 300 Chinese public high schools, offering free training to debaters and guidance for teachers looking to start debate clubs. So all said and done, we've actually hit about 50,000 students. We've trained and reached about 50,000 students all across China for free. We also host these regional tournaments that these students were able to succeed in order to compete here in the United States. I'd say that it definitely takes a great amount of courage, not only to debate against native speakers of English, but to do so in front of a really big stage. I hope that you guys will be a sympathetic audience. Lastly, I'd like to say a big congratulations to our debaters who are not here right now, but will be coming in about 30 minutes. They're late because they were debating at Harvard earlier today, and they actually got second place in the international division of the Harvard Debate Tournament. We also have among us the first speaker at the Harvard Debate Tournament, Li Peiying, who is one of the strongest debaters at the Harvard Debate Tournament, so big congratulations to her as well. So our topic is going to be resolved that civil society organizations should take a leading role in environmental protection. So we're not going to contextualize this inside America or China. Any national context would be acceptable. So on the pro, saying that civil society organizations should take a leading role in environmental protection, will be Liu Jiapei and Eliza Posner. Liu Jiapei is from Tianjin Nankai Senior High School, which is the alma mater of Zhou Enlai. He also happens to be the debate coach at his school. Even though he's a senior, he actually coaches a lot of novices quite successfully, actually. So Eliza is from St. Luke's School in New Canaan, Connecticut. Her and her teammate Chloe Cajun are having a banner year. They've just won 3 out of 4 of the tournaments that they attended at the Connecticut Debate Association's tournaments. They also Eliza in particular is qualified for the World Debate Championships. So really one of the best debaters in Connecticut and nationally. Defending the Khan is Xiao Ze'en from Zhenjiang Maple Leaf International School. He actually has organized and was one of the first debaters in China to have organized his own regional tournament completely on his own. He was responsible for student and judge recruitment as well as facilities acquisition, so truly an organizational feat. Also, we have Chloe Kakajian from St. Luke's School in New Canaan, who is Eliza's partner when they debate together. So, with that said, we'll now get the debate started. All right, so as is convention in American public forum debate, we've already decided the sides. However, we have not decided the speaking order. So we usually flip a coin to decide that. So who would like to call heads or tails? It's tails. Okay. So the pro on the audience's right-hand side will be speaking first. The con will be speaking second. So we'll now begin the debate with a 4-minute constructive speech given by each team, where they'll lay out their arguments in support of the resolution. After that, we'll have a 3-minute crossfire period, which is similar to cross-examination, where either side can ask or answer questions to each other. Following that, we'll have 4-minute rebuttals, in which students attack each other's arguments for 4 minutes, followed by another crossfire between the 2 rebuttal speakers. Then we'll have a summary speech in which the debaters defend their cases, followed by a final focus, where the debaters are allowed to conclude. If you wanted to speak from your desk, that's probably easier. You'll need that for crossfire, so stay at your desk. So if everyone makes sure that when you're speaking, turn on the microphone. When you're not, turn it off. Okay, so I now call on Liu Jiapei to give the constructive speech for the pro side, explaining why civil society organizations should take a leading role in environmental protection. Mr. Speaker, you have 4 minutes.
Okay, am I audible? Yes. Yeah, okay. Opponents? Judges? The audience, are you ready? Okay, start off right now. 3, 2, 1. Okay. We affirm, resolve, civil society organizations should take a leading role in environmental protection. The definition of civil society is social interaction between the household and the state characterized by community cooperation, structures of voluntary association, and networks of public communication. It is characterized as a sphere of social life that is public but excludes government activities. The whole core of this debate is whether government agencies or civil society should take a greater role in protecting the environment. Ought to be decided on ability to develop, implement, and maximize influence of a certain decision. It should not be decided based on willingness or better executive power. Contention 1. Governments and polluters rely on each other, which puts obstacles for governments to protect the environment. Claim. Budgets from environmental protection come from polluters. The warrant is in West Virginia. The Department of Environmental Protection is appointed by elected officials funded by the coal industry. Inspectors and enforcers are told that their primary job is to help chemical companies ensure that they can continue to operate, and companies rarely face fines when they violate environmental codes. The second warrant is from China. China revised its environmental protection laws to strengthen the enforcement power of local officials. But the new law doesn't end the impunity that polluters presently enjoy. Local governments provide most of the budgets for environmental agencies, drawing on revenues that come from local businesses that are the chief polluters. Paradoxically, if pollution is reduced, lowered environmental fees could shrink the agency's budgets. The impact of this argument is, if governments want to protect the environment, it must first let businesses to pollute because that's where the money comes from. Ironically, more environmental actions taken by governments mean more pollution. Second contention is civil society is better at collecting environmental information. Claim, non-government organizations should encourage local community to monitor their environment. Warren, in India, an NGO called Development Alternative created a Clean India program by working with 5 schools in the national capital in 1998. Today, Clean Delhi has about 40 schools regularly involved in monitoring water and air quality in over 150 locations spread across Delhi. Over 2,000 children have been directly trained on environmental assessment and improvement activities. The experience in Delhi indicates that when environment assessment is community-based, it mobilized the community to review the local environment and conditions and take requisite measures without waiting for external support. The impact of this argument is, with community engagement, civil society such as NGO can collect information covering a wide area. This information is crucial for environmental protection as it allows a thorough early warning system. The third contention is civil society can easily implement environmental protections and protection decisions. Claim, civil society faces less resistance when conducting research. Warren, community-based and participatory research, which is CBPR, emerged in the United States over the past 25 years as an important alternative to more traditional investigator-initiated research that used community residents as research subjects and create a sense of inequity, mistrust, and exploitation. CBRP has been described as research with and for communities rather than research on communities. The impact of this argument is CBRP promotes public participation in environmental protection. It links environmental protection with residents' health, and thus local residents see the benefits gained from those activities. Consequently, it becomes easier to conduct research in cooperation with them. Thus, we affirm. Thanks.
Thank you for that constructive speech. We'll now have a constructive speech given by the con side.
So is everyone ready? Judges ready? Opponents ready? Partner ready? Great. Oh, okay. Do you mind stop this again?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks. Sorry about that. Okay. Then time starts now. Winnicke resolves civil society organizations should take a leading role in environmental protection. For clarification, we'll provide the following definition. Civil society is the aggregate of non-governmental organizations and institutions that manifest interest and will of citizens. Contention 1, government executive powers are crucial to fighting pollution. Subpoint A, government can impose taxes to eliminate negative environmental externalities. And negative externalities in economic activity that imposes a negative effect on an unrelated third party. It can arise either during the production or the consumption of a good or service. Pierce reviews that the evidence of, the evidence on the appropriate value of the social cost of carbon to be used in UK policy appraisal. His conclusion suggests a range of the social cost of carbon of 0.82 pound to 1.64 pound per ton of carbon dioxide, assuming a 3% discount rate. UK imposed the climate change levy since 2001 industrial and commercial energy use. The full rates of the levy are 0.154 p per K on gas, 0.44 pound per kilo on electricity, and 1.201 pound per kilogram on coal. The tax is not applied to renewables. The OECD said that in Sweden, where dirty automotive diesel have been taxed relatively heavily since 1991, almost all diesel is now of the cleanest type, and sulfur emission from diesel vehicle have fallen by 75%. In Norway, the carbon dioxide tax have prompted a switch away from fossil fuels, cutting emissions from power stations and factories by 1/5 since 1991. All companies and industries must pay the environmental damage on society by taxes. It is an obligation enforced by the government rather than industrial leaders' own unstable interests. Companies will decrease their use of natural gas accordingly. Subpoint B, government can impose directly regulations when when environment gets too bad. Zhou Shengxian, China's Minister of Environment Protection, says that 434,000 staff were involved in the APEC Blue Sky mission orchestrated by the central government, Beijing, Tianjin, Hebei, Shanxi, Inner Mongolia, Shandong, and Henan. Their work included inspecting 60,100 industrial plants and 123,000 other ventures, including construction site and petrol station. About 10,000 plants had suspended production, and 39,000 others were told to limit the hours they operate. With around-the-clock supervision by officials, the report said at least 11.7 million vehicles were ordered off the road each day to cut exhaust emission during the meeting. The Beijing Environment Monitoring Center said between November 1st and 12th, air pollutants in the capital fell to their lowest level in 5 years. Even in a city that has long suffered from pollution can have blue sky for a short time when clean air is needed. When the environment is too bad, government regulation is the most efficient method to cure it in a short time. Condition 2, government can promote the use of clean energy. Subpoint A, government subsidies are incentives for the industry to develop clean energy. The United States federal government has given generously to the clean energy industry over the last few years, funneling billions of dollars in grants, loans, and tax breaks to renewable power sources like wind and solar, biofuel, and electric vehicles. During the recession, the clean tech was one of the few sectors to add jobs. Costs of wind turbines and solar cells have fallen over the last 5 years. Electricity from renewables have more than doubled. Construction is underway on the country's first nuclear power plant in decades, and the United States remain an important player in the global clean energy market. Subsidies make industries treatment clean energy development as a beneficial project and thus invest into these areas. Subpoint B, government and governmental agencies can increase the use of clean energy. BYD CEO Wang Chuanfu devotes a lot of time to nurturing its relationship with China's city governments. BYD had put 40 all-electric taxis into service in the city of Shenzhen on May 17, 2010. Shenzhen Bus Group is a large operator of bus lines, taxis, and related business in southern Guangdong region. Its largest shareholder is Shenzhen City SASAC. In other words, BYD's partner in this joint venture is none other than city government of Shenzhen. These taxis are being operated by Pengcheng Electric Taxi Company, a joint venture between BYD and Shenzhen Bus Group. Because BYD's E6 costs the equivalent about US $50,000, and because the technology is still fairly new and untested, and because taxi drivers tend to drive their vehicles far more aggressively than average driver, one might guess that this joint venture between BYD and City of Shenzhen will lose money for foreseeable future. But this is where the public-private partnership proved to be a win-win. When clean energy is just developed and untrusted by general public, government can promote social awareness of the new technology. Consequently, it will be accepted by the general public, thus Winegate.
Thank you very much for those constructive speeches. We'll now begin the crossfire period of the debate. Does either team require preparation time before crossfire? Okay, 30 seconds and counting. Okay, we'll now have the crossfire given between the two constructive speakers from each team. We'll begin, as is convention, with the pro side and the first speaker offering the first question.
Okay. Opponents ready?
Yes.
Okay. Can I have the first question?
Sure.
Why is government executive power relevant to this round?
Because we're talking about which organization should the government or the civil organization take the leading role, and we're talking about government's executive power because that makes it easier in fighting pollution.
Okay. You are saying that there is a lot of promises are receiving reduction of pollution. I live in Tianjin, and their air pollution index are over 400 every day. Why is that even happening today? Since it's crucial to fighting pollution.
It is happening. That is true. But what we are saying is that the government is capable of doing it, as the example we have provided, that it is easier to fight off. Whereas,
you are just saying it's capable, right?
Yeah, let's just talk about Tianjin. You're saying that Tianjin's pollution is bad, and there are social organizations in Tianjin, and they should be the one, according to you, doing the job, and they are not doing the job either. And according to what you have provided, you haven't provided examples of the social organization being more efficient in helping.
We are not saying it has to be more helping. The point is the interpretation of leading role is crucial to this debate. The leading role, the meaning of leading role is not who has the better, a stronger power. It's according to our framework, it's inability to develop, implement, and maximize influence of a certain decision. It's not about power. It's about engagement, civic engagement.
Sorry, can I have the next question?
Yeah.
You have been talking about that the government, if want to protect the environment, must first let business to pollute. Can you show me the rationale of this must?
Well, if there is no money, those government officers will not receive their wages, right?
So you're saying that every single money of the government.
I'm not saying every single dollars worth yuan was from that. I was saying that there is strong correlation between those government officers and those in the polluting industries.
You're saying so it's a correlation. So it's not
it's not causation. Sorry.
Yeah, it's causation.
Causation.
So you're saying that the government must rely on the business if it want to protect the environment. Are you saying like that?
I was not saying that. I was oh, well, the point is, if they have no money, then they have nothing to do with environmental protection. Yeah.
That is time. So we'll now begin the rebuttal period of the debate between the two second speakers. Each rebuttal will last for 4 minutes. Pro side, do you need any preparation time before rebuttals? Okay, we'll now have the rebuttal given by Eliza lasting for 4 minutes.
Okay, so for this rebuttal speech, I'm going to start on the opposition's first contention, which is that governments have executive powers. First of all, I want to talk about how we defined leading role, which is in our framework. So we said that leading role is the ability to develop, implement, and maximize influence. It should not be based on willingness or better executive power, and that's what we're talking about here, executive power. So we think that civil society organizations are more willing to implement change. You can see that because they don't rely on the polluters like government does. We also think that they have more ability to develop and maximize influence because they're directly connected to the community. Now I want to talk about some of the examples that were brought up. So the first example that was brought up was a carbon tax in the United Kingdom. So they tell you that you can tax carbon and that this is good for the environment, but they don't tell you that this has happened and the environment is still not doing too great. There's still pollution, even with the measures that have been taken place. Next, they tell you about how a diesel tax has worked in Sweden, but continue to ignore the fact that places around the world are still polluted. So obviously, if we're debating this, these measures haven't gone far enough and government isn't doing a good enough job. Next, they talk about Norway, a fossil fuels tax, and tell you that this is working well. Again, I'll say that things can work, but government measures haven't gone far enough, and you can see that government isn't willing to go far enough. We think sometimes the reason that government isn't willing to go far enough is because government and polluters rely on each other and essentially are in bed with each other. In fact, in the United States, States, candidates for elections who often win are supported with money that comes from oil and gas corporations. That means they're going to support those companies' ability to continue to pollute and not make executive decisions that go far enough once they get into government. The next thing I'll talk about is the example that they brought up that governments can take action when the environment gets too bad. So they tell you that there was this example in China where a single place got cleaned up for a conference. So first of all, like my partner said in Crossfire, there's pretty bad pollution in most places in China, and this measure definitely didn't solve it. In fact, what they tell you in their impact is that it caused a blue sky for a short period of time. Government measures that take drastic measures to get a blue sky for a day or 2 days or 3 days are not the correct type of measures. I want a blue sky for everyone in China for years into the future, not for 2 days or 3 days or even a month. This is not a good measure, and when government only focuses on a specific conference or a specific day, or say cleaning up for the Beijing Olympics, it's not a good idea to do that because it's not policy that actually focuses on the future. Next, I'll talk about their point about subsidies. So they tell you that the United States has subsidies for clean energy. The United States is a huge world polluter. Clearly, these subsidies haven't gone far enough. They tell you that these subsidies have helped add jobs in the clean energy industry. We think that government can add jobs in the clean energy industry, and civil society organizations can still have a leading role in environmental protection. We don't think that government taking action and civil societies taking action are essentially mutually exclusive. We just think that civil societies should take more of a leading role in environmental protection because that's a good thing. Things like government subsidies can still happen in the affirmative world. We just think that civil society organizations need a more leading role. But they also tell you that there's this clean energy example from China, where essentially what happened is there was a partnership with the government and a company called BYD. The government helped to promote awareness. We think that, first of all, cross-apply what I said above about how China's environment is not doing too well. There's huge pollution in China, so clearly measures like this are not doing that well for the environment. Also, cross-apply what I said about how governments and polluters rely on each other, so the Chinese government is never going to go far enough, and small partnerships like this are not enough to really make change. But also, partnerships like this, when the government promotes awareness, we think civil society organizations promote more awareness and have less resistance with things like community-based programs, which we talk about in our third contention. So for these reasons, we propose.
Okay, we'll now have a rebuttal given by the con side, given by the second speaker. Madam Speaker, are you ready, or do you need preparation time?
I'm ready. I just want to, is this working? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
All right, we'll now have a 4-minute rebuttal given by the con side. Madam Speaker, whenever you're ready.
Okay. Hi, thank you. I'm really happy to be here. What I want to do is start by going into the contentions offered by the pro side. So their first contention talks about how government and polluters rely on each other. And they give you two examples, one of the United States and one of China. What we want to say is, yeah, government and polluters sometimes rely on each other. Sometimes they have conflicts of interest. But the same thing happens with civil society organizations. Civil society organizations have external interests. How do they get their funding? They get their funding from companies. And we think that because of that, sometimes corporations will put their money into civil society organizations and create conflicting interests. We think either way has conflicting interests. So we don't think that point really matters. We think what we should talk about is which side can exact more change. We think the government can, because we show you definitive ways that the government can improve environmental protection. We think also governments get money from taxpayers, so it's a lot, they're less reliant on independent sources with independent issues and independent ideas. So I want to go on to their second contention, which is that civil society organizations are better at taking collecting information. What we tell you is that collecting information is great, and we think that's not really a leading role. You can collect information, but that's not really a leading role in environmental protection, because that information is only environmental protection if it's used. We think the people that are using that information is the government, which shows that the government can use this information to create actual environmental protection. In our side, you can have both the government taking action, but also get that information. Their third contention is that there's going to be less resistance, and they talk about that. What we think is there's actually going to be more resistance, because civil society society organizations are often very extreme, especially when they have environmental concerns. We have a few examples. So one is Greenpeace. Greenpeace is a civil society organization that is one of the largest in the world. They have a lot of conflicts and a lot of bad things that have happened. They actually broke into a facility in Australia that was growing experimental GMOs, and they burned down, they got rid of all the crops and destroyed the whole thing. So what they do is they'll take illegal actions. They recently walked over the Nazca Lines, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So what happens is you get extreme organizations that are willing to do anything for the environment and use those motivations to do bad things. We don't think that's good. We think you're going to create more resistance, because what's going to happen is you're going to have extreme actions. We don't want extremists. We want change. Now I want to go into some of the things that they said on our case. On our first contention, which is about how government can actually do things because they have executive powers, they say, well, we're not talking about executive powers. Our contention is about executive powers because we think that those executive powers can be used to exact change. And what they want is to talk about who maximizes change. We maximize change because we have the executive power to create change. And what they say to our first subpoint about taxes, as they talk about our two examples of the U.S. carbon tax and in Sweden. They say, well, the environment's not great, so clearly that's not enough. We think that's actually worse with the civil society organizations, because they don't show you that civil society organizations can have a significant impact. We give you examples of the government exacting change. They don't. We also think it's worse because it'll shift the burden off of the government. We want to make sure the governments are still doing things. We think if the government doesn't feel motivated to take action, that's really bad. We think that will hurt people in the long run. And then on our second subpoint, they say, well, there's bad pollution in China. Again, we think that this shows that the government still is doing things, but that's really important. They don't show you that civil society organizations are doing enough for the environment. So our second contention, it was about clean energy, and what we tell you is the government creates subsidies, and what they say, well, the United States is a big polluter, clearly they're not doing enough. We show you that they're actually investing in green technology. We think that can increase. We also think that it's really important that we have that investment, because then more green technology can develop. And what they say is, well, you can do both of these things, but we think that the government is just better for a lot of the reasons we talk about. Then our last point under this was about how we actually can increase clean energy. We talk about BYD and their taxis. And what they say again is China has bad environmental effects. We think that what you do is you take that burden off of the government, and we show you that the government can be effective. If the government has to increase the role that they're taking and have to increase that leading role, that's fine, but we think they should still have that leading role. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those rebuttal speeches. We'll now begin another crossfire between the two rebuttal speakers. Does either side need preparation time before crossfire? Okay. Okay, we'll now have the crossfire between the two rebuttal speakers. The pro speaker has the first question.
Okay, so you talk about extremist groups like Greenpeace. Why is Greenpeace typical, or is Greenpeace an anomaly?
We think that Greenpeace is an example of a group that can do things. There are also other groups that are, Greenpeace is one of the largest environmental organizations. We think that's a good example. We think when they take a leading role, that increases the amount of extreme actions that are taken. Another example is the Earth Liberation Front, which is known for actually doing things like committing arson.
Okay, so now you have two examples. Do you have any more? Or are there just two extreme examples that you can come up with?
I've given you two examples. I think that it's really probable to think when you increase the role of civil society organizations, you get more extreme actions.
Why is that?
That's because you give them a leading role, you give them more power. Again, we think that Greenpeace is one of the largest organizations that shows what they'll do. Can I ask the next question?
Sure. Okay.
Is there when the leading role is created with civil society organizations, what will they do for the environment?
They're going to do all the things that we said they're going to do in their case. We're going to collect information because we think civil society organizations are better at collecting information. They're going to be able to implement programs better than the government can, and they're going to be able to do more for the environment because government and polluters rely on each other.
Okay, what about the fact that civil society organizations need to get external funding?
government gets external funding. I mean, candidates who run for office often get funding. I talked about that in my case. So like the harm that you bring up, there's that harm on your side of the house as well. We don't think that this external funding often comes from people who want to pollute the environment. I mean, why would oil and gas have an interest in investing in a civil society organization that essentially wants to take them down? It doesn't make much sense.
Okay. Does the government, or when you talk about research, does research necessarily mean that they're taking a leading role in environmental protection?
Yeah, I think that research is so important that you can say that conducting the majority of the research is taking a leading role. You can't make environmental policy, you can't implement something that will help the environment, you can't do anything without having first researched it. So I think that even if the government carries out something that has been thoroughly researched by a civil society organization, that's really a civil society organization taking the leading role, because it's government acting on what civil society organizations say or how they research things. So that means that they do have a leading role.
Okay. How do civil society organizations implement policy?
We talk about that in our third contention, where you tell you that there are community-based programs. Can I ask the next question?
Sure.
Yeah, so you say that if civil society organizations have a leading role in environmental protection, it'll take the burden off of the government. Can't two things have a leading role, and can't two things be participating in helping the environment at the same time?
Okay, we think we're in this debate where we have to talk about which is taking the leading role, like which over the other. We think if it was just about both of them doing the equal amount of work, we wouldn't be having this argument. But we think that it's definitely a good thing for governments to have that leading role, because government can exact change like we showed in our case.
Okay, but even if civil society organizations take a leading role, can't the government still be involved?
We think that when the government is, when people think that civil society organizations are taking a leading role, they'll get behind those civil society organizations because they'll think, oh, they can exact more change. We think that's a problem because it takes the focus off of the government.
That is time. So we'll now begin the summary speech phase of the debate, given by the first speakers who read you their cases. Each speech will last for 2 minutes. Pro, do you need any preparation time before summary speech?
Nope.
Okay, we'll now have a 2-minute summary speech given by Liu Jiapei from Tianjin Nankai High School.
Okay. Everyone ready? Okay. Start off now. First, go through our framework. They have dropped our framework, which means that that is still valid, should be valid in this round. We have talked about like development, implementation, and maximization of influence over certain decisions should be the core question of today's round. First, they talk about the first condition. They've been talking about government regulation. That's how these things, like this is completely a power issue. That's how they, like, let's combine our contention 2 and contention 3, which is civil society better collecting information and research. Well, the first point, regulation does not make that easily. Regulations need cooperation between governments and corporations. That takes a lot of time. That mitigate their impacts and feasibility. And let's look at our combination of condition 2 and condition 3. What you're looking at, Judge, is that like you have cases in India, like in over 150 locations spread across LA, and over 2,000 children have been directly trained in environmental assessment and improvement activities. That means what? That means all of these powers are directly coming from those civilians, and which provides more mobility, and there is more broader scale or broader, like deeper depth of our researches and things to change, like things to mitigate their contentions. And the second thing, they talk about how our civil society organizations' money was from government, but that is not right. Civil society organizations' money is funded by the people, by the private owners, by the civilians, not the government. And what they have been talking about is like they have failed to see like how governments and polluters are standing as a reliance, and that makes that like contention false. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you for that summary speech. We'll now have a summary speech given by the con side lasting for 2 minutes. Zane, do you need any preparation time? Okay, we'll now have a 2-minute summary speech given by the con side.
So, is this working now? Oh, it looks like this. So before I start, I should just say we'll be generally going through the framework and then basically on their case, and if time permits, we'll go back to our case. So time then starts now. So first, look at our opponent's framework. They have been talking about that the ones that should be taking the leading role is the ability to actually develop and to implement policies, and that actually quite agrees with what we have been talking about. And what we are saying is that at the first contention of our case is that the government have the executive power, and thus it actually have the ability to develop strategies and to thus help solving the problems. And then they have been talking about that the social organizations have the power, and then they give the example of 2,000 children, but they're only giving the example that they can make 2,000 children focus on solving the environment. What we're telling you is that it is actually clear that government's definitely more powerful than 2,000 children. And then they have been talking about that research is important. We agree on the fact that research is fairly important, but that not necessarily means that the social organizations should be taking the leading role. Because the organizations and government can cooperate with each other, but implement policies or making deals, the government know more about the nation and know more about what is the right decision to make, whereas the organizations are the ones that can conduct the research. But remember that conducting the research is not everything about solving the problem, whereas the laws and regulations are actually the more important thing. And therefore, the government should be the one that is taking the leading role here, as what we have talked about in the case of BYD and the government. BYD on its own wouldn't be having all those electric taxis, but with the government, they can do.
All right, thank you for that summary speech. We'll now begin the final focus period of the debate. The final focuses are the last speeches of the debate, where the second speakers will give concluding remarks, reasons why you should vote for their team. So we'll begin with the pro side. Pro, you have 1 minute and 30 seconds left of prep time. Would you like to use it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right, we'll now have the final focus given by the second speaker of the pro side.
So first, I want to talk about government policy. The opposition side of the debate tells you in both their first and their second contentions that government have power and they can use that power to enact change on the environment. They fail to show you that governments have in the past actually enacted good change. So they fail to solve for protecting the environment. If governments haven't protected the environment in the past, how are they going to do it better in the future? They advocate for the status quo when they say that we should have governments taking the leading role, and in the status quo there's not good enough environmental protection because we're debating this, because we see that climate change is a huge issue. So if they can't solve for actually making governments do policy that works, they can't win the debate, and the government shouldn't take the leading role. My second voting issue comes about research. So the opposition side of the debate tells you that research isn't taking a leading role, and we disagree with this. If civil society organizations research comes before policy, and therefore is more important than the policy itself, because it's the research that creates the policy, and it's the research that governments build their policy around. So if civil society organizations are taking the leading role in research, they are taking the leading role in environmental protection, and we should win on that. My third voting issue is a combination of our second and third contentions, which is about civil society organizations are better at collecting information and are better at implementation. So we show you how they get the community involved. We show you how they get the everyday citizen involved. That's something that government policy doesn't do. Getting an everyday citizen involved in actually protecting the environment is more important, because in order to make widespread environmental change, in order to actually protect the environment, every human has to be involved in it. The government side, or the opposition side of the debate, doesn't get that, but we get you worldwide change. We get you mobilizing the community. We get you widespread areas covered with research. We show you that through our Clean India program, and we get the environmental protection ideas that we talk about in this debate actually linked with the communities that it matters to. So we think for these reasons, you should vote proposition.
Thank you for that final focus speech. We'll now have the final focus bit given by the con side. Do you guys need preparation time?
How much preparation?
You have 1 minute, 30 seconds remaining as well. Okay. That's 1 minute, 30 seconds used. All right, we'll now have our final focus speech and the last speech of the debate given by the second speaker of the con side.
Okay. Thank you. I want to get into two voting issues. My first is who can create the most change, which side? And I think that this is coming from their framework, which talks about like who can exact the most change. We think that this is really about potential change created, because we think neither side is really advocating for the status quo. We're debating about who should take the leading role. So I want to talk about what the government does. What the government gives you is it gives you taxes, regulations, subsidies, and increasing clean energy. We think these are all really good, and we give you lots of examples of how these policies can reduce a lot of climate change problems. We think those are really good. We want to make sure that we're increasing policies like that. We show you government can create policies. Now, if you talk about civil society organizations, what they give you is they give you research. And researching is great, but it's not really environmental protection itself. What's environmental protection is using that policy. It's like here at the debate, right? When you research, that's not the debate itself. What's the debate itself is us arguing on stage. But without the debate, there's not really a point in doing all this research. It's just like taking a lot of time up. We don't think that's really a good thing. And what they give you is they also give you community programs. We think that that's fine, but that's not really a sweeping change that we need. Environmental policy needs to be something substantial. We need that now. We don't think that community programs are going to be enough, because we don't think that you can get every community involved. Now I want to get into our second voting issue, which is what happens when civil society organizations have that leading role. Well, we think that they're dependent on funding by external people, and we don't think that's good because they use those external interests and they use their own interests. The government uses taxpayer money. And though sometimes they do get external interests, we think that civil society organizations actually get more influence from external interests. And we also think that you also get extreme groups that don't really exact change. We don't think Greenpeace has actually done enough. We don't think that they do good things for the environment, but we do see that they cause a lot of harms. They destroy experimental GMO crops. They hurt UNESCO World Heritage Sites. We think these are bad. We want to give you ways to create change. We want to give you power to enforce change, and we think the government does that a lot better than civil society organizations. For those reasons, we want you to vote opposition. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both sides, all four debaters, for that fantastic debate. We'd now like to open up the floor to critiques as well as comments from our judges. First, I'd like to invite Gavin Newton-Tanzer, who's the chairman of the advisory board of NHS-DLC, to offer some brief comments.
All right, well, congratulations to both sides of the debate. I'd just like to give them another round of applause. They met each other actually just 5 minutes ago, right before this round, and this is really hard to do. So I think this round was really great for a couple of reasons. I mean, both we saw the mixed teams, which I think is fantastic. It demonstrates that debate isn't just one country or another competing. It's not just about one specific group of interests, but it's actually about a way of expressing ideas and actually seeing some interesting dialogue between both parties. So I think for those of you that are new to debate, I know a lot of us who are not, so that are actually very experienced in it, we saw both a framework debate where both sides are talking about what it means to take a leading role for either civil society or the government. And then we also saw the second half where we're actually talking about whether or not what, for example, does research constitute taking a first action, or which side actually can execute and actually create policy change. Ultimately, they took sort of the general statement of like civil societies should take a leading role, et cetera, and turn it into something that means much more to the rest of us, what will actually improve the status of the environment. So I think that was really fantastic, contextualizing it, make sure it means something to the rest of the audience. I don't think we will have another chance after this, so I would like to ask the debaters a question, though you can respond after hearing some comments for the rest. Would love to hear a little bit about what it is in your life that makes debate really important to you. I think that would be really interesting to hear before you do finish. So maybe telling a little bit about what got you involved and why you enjoy it. But first, let's hand it off to the other commentators.
Okay, so I'd like to invite Orville Schell, the Arthur Ross Director of the Asia Society Center on U.S.-China Relations.
Well, congratulations to all of you. I must say that to our Chinese colleagues, I stand in awe. There's nothing more difficult than to debate in a second language. So whoever wins or loses, I think they've done a wonderful job. You know, having had something to do with thinking through this subject, this topic, I have to say, maybe we didn't do such a great job. Because in reality, I kept thinking and listening to you all debating. There are really two questions here. One is theory. You know, how should it be? How could it be? And the other is practice. How is it? And I think you suggested a little of that in your remarks. And so I think the question that occurs to me as I listen to you is, and I don't know to which one of you to address this, what happens when governments don't want to do anything at all, even if civil society is doing what they should and is pushing? So that's one question. And the second question I'm very curious to ask, because we have debaters from two countries. What do you all view as the differences between the role of a debate in the two societies?
Okay, thank you very much for those great questions. We'll now have Michelle Choi, who is the president of the Harvard College Mentors for Urban Debate, offer her comments.
So I felt very similarly to Orville in that I think that there was a big question not just about what policies were effective, but also what governments or NGOs or communities or service organizations should do. So I think it was a very interesting debate in which one side would say that the government should do something, but then there was always the attack of whether or not the government was actually able to do so. So I think that those larger questions both were left. It's hard in such a short debate format to cover all of those, and so it was nice at the end to at least have some framework in which to evaluate those. But also, I have a question more about, because I was so impressed with your guys' ability to speak in front of such large groups of people, how do you guys have different strategies when you're doing a demo round in front of such large audiences, and whether or not that shifts the way that you present your arguments or the strategy and arguments you go for? Because I know it influences the judges when you have so many people evaluating your decision. So I'm curious how that influences the way that you communicate to us judges.
All right, thanks very much for those questions, judges. So I guess we'll talk about Gavin's question first, since it seems like we're all debaters on stage. Alex, why don't we just go in order of the people who spoke. Alex, what got you into debate, and what role has debate taken in your life? Probably keep it around 1 minute.
Well, the first question, I got involved in debate like in elementary school. I was like pretty aggressive back then. I love to argue with people, like shouting and stuff. Then I was like, whoa, let's debate. Let's go for it. Yeah. And when I come for high school, there is David Weeks and Gavin, who are having this debate league in China. We have this debate club in our high school, so I go to the high school like a debate club, and I got involved in this American debate. And I think the role in debate in like how does it interpret in my life, the first element is communication. Like debate is the most intensive communication, where you got a bunch of evidences, like you got a lot of frameworks and theories presented, and how to contextualize these stuff into one round, into 45 minutes matters. So first point, communication skill. Like second point, speaking skill, and that's all.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Zane, I'd like to hear your thoughts. What role has debate taken in your life?
So I'll first go with how I met debate.
Sure.
So like Alex, I also know about debate because of the National High School Debate League of China, and similar to Alex, I love debate a lot. I love to argue, I love to shout and yell. And then I found American Debate Public Forum, which the China's Debate League is doing, is very much suited to me, and I feel like it's quite intense, and then I had more chances to go many places and meet many good debaters, and therefore I met a lot of my best friends from debate, and debate it's changed my minds on a lot of things, because in debate you must look at everything in different perspectives, so it's hard for you to be partial in everything, so kind of changed me a lot.
Okay, so for you guys, I'd actually love to turn the table over to Orville's question, the first one. In particular, the folks defending government policy. So Orville's first question was, what do you do if the government actually doesn't want to take any action in defense of the environment? I'd love to hear from you first.
When government doesn't really take action, though they should, I think that's really important, and I think that's kind of where we kind of come in, especially in the United States, where you can have a lot of input. I think that's really important. But the unfortunate thing is a lot of times we do see that government doesn't take action. I think the interesting thing about this round is neither should really take a leading role. I think civil society organizations play their role, and I think governments play their role. And I think if both of them work together, that's the best way to get actual change. I hope that answers the question.
Fantastic. So, Eliza, I'm really curious, seeing as that you're one of the more decorated debaters here, I would like to hear your thoughts on what do you think the role of debate in the United States is, and maybe we'll turn it over to Zane and Alex to talk about the role of debate in China. So, what do you think the role of debate is in the United States, societally or politically?
That's a really hard question because there's so many forms of debate. I mean, there's high school debate, there's debate in politics, there's debate in practically every facet of life. But I think that what Alex said about debate teaching you how to communicate with people, like that's the role of debate. It's to express your ideas, but not just to express them in any way, but to express them in the best way possible so that ideas can clash with each other and so that people can see what they might want to believe in or what they should believe in or can have their minds changed by debate.
Fantastic. Chloe, do you have any thoughts on the role of debate specifically in the United States?
I think debate's really important. I think you see a lot of debaters who tackle complex issues like at the high school level, and that's really important. Those who are able to debate and able to look at different viewpoints are the people that can really make effective change and can really be informed when they try to do things, and I think that's a really good thing. But I think Eliza summed it up pretty well.
Okay, so I'd like to turn the table over now to Zane and Alex. So you guys have seen debate in the United States, both on stage and at UPenn, and you've also seen lots of debates in China. What do you think the major differences are, or do you think that there's maybe something in common that's very strong or powerful?
Whoa, there's a lot. There's really, really, really a lot. Like traditional Chinese debate. Let me show you a topic then. There is like probably the topic is like, will we be contaminated, or sort of contaminated if you hang out with bad kids in school, or you got like sort of improved and purified if you go out like with good kids. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? Like really, I was like, what? And after I know this, like, so the point is, first, there's no evidence involved. Like, they are basically spitting words. And the second point, it's very messy. Like, the judges, or the judges are like teachers in school. Like, they have this, like, biased, they walking around with this biased information and stuff. They are not going to like interpret it like even if the like lay judges do. And the second point.
Okay, so
yeah,
perhaps a powerful reason for why English debate is better than Chinese debate in China is that the topics are better because we pick them. So Zane, do you have any thoughts in response to, or in agreement with Alex on the differences between debate as you see it in China and debate as we experience in the U.S.?
Well, like Eliza Posner have said, there's so many kinds of debate in America, and I don't personally think there's a huge difference if we were to compare like Lincoln-Douglas debate and Chinese debate. They're more like similar because like Chinese debate, traditional debate, we're more like talking about morality and like what's fundamentally correct, and we're not too much looking towards evidence. But like Chinese debate is still fun if you like to yell and shout a lot like what I did.
Okay, so last question. I'd like to open it up to everyone. What's your secret? How do you guys fight stage fright, much less in a second language? Do you guys have any public speaking advice or suggestions as far as fighting stage fright or nervousness? You guys seem to pull it off pretty well. So what are your secrets?
I guess I'll just go. But what I've found is we've been in a couple of final rounds, and if you're really nervous, the best thing to do is just find one person that smiles at no matter what you say. Because there's always one in every crowd, like whether it's some high schooler who's not paying attention or some parent who has no idea what's going on, there's someone who's smiling. You just look at that person the whole time and you don't get nervous because you think... I must be saying something smart if they're smiling, right? So that's...
Very good answer. Pro side, any thoughts?
I'm completely with Chloe. That's just how you do it.
All right, well, with that, that concludes our debate. Thank you very much to our debaters for that fantastic round and those great answers to those questions.
While they're doing this, I just have three quick, very simple things to say. Thing number one is I don't ever want to get into an argument with any one of these young people about anything. Number two, listen up now. Even if I'm not here, if in a few years' time any of you want a job, please give the Asia Society a call. And lastly, we're into the last, there's no more debating, but Orville Schell, my great colleague, is going to come up and run a panel discussion where you're all invited to join the conversation. And again, others have said it, but thank you all. You were terrific.
We come to a part of the program that's a little bit unclear in concept, but let me try to start things off here. Listening to this debate, you know, it did occur to me that perhaps a better topic, and I'd like to try this out on all of you, might have been this. Which country, the United States or China, who have very different societies, forms of government, historical circumstances, does a better job at environmental protection?
Well, I think that certainly it's true that in the United States we have very active environmental protection organizations. I think that many of the conflicts of interest that the debaters brought up, where you have companies that are being regulated, paying this most significant amount of tax revenues to the governments that are supposed to be regulating them. I think these conflicts of interest are really persistent and constant, not only in China as well as in the United States. I personally have lived in China for a fairly short time, only 3 years, but perhaps our colleagues on the panel who have lived in China for longer can probably better speak to environmental protection in the U.S. versus China.
Well, I think the really important thing here is that we should refrain from making anachronistic comparisons. Like, I guess we need to bear in mind that China and America are in fundamentally different phases of development. Like, America is already a developed nation, probably the most developed nation ever in human history, while China is still basically in a trajectory of upward economic expansion and probably political reform and things like that. So we're really talking about two different countries in two completely different phases of development. And I would say that for me personally, when I see it, I believe the Chinese government is really trying very hard to really do a good job in environmental protection, because sometimes you really have this contradiction between economic development and environmental protection, which is not so which is not so explicit in America. In America, you already experience these things. These are already the past. But in China, this is everyday issue facing you right now. So I would really encourage the audience here, whether you're from the US, you're from China, really be very cautious in making comparisons, because we have to bear in mind that China and America are really two completely different countries in two completely different phases of development. That will be my comment here.
If you can't tell, Gary is a former debater.
You know, it's interesting what you just said, because you suggested that maybe we here in America think that we do a better job. Actually, I asked the question because I think many of us here in America think that we are not doing such a great job. I mean, we do have had our successes, but for instance, in climate change, we have a rather advanced state of paralysis in Washington. And so it raises the interesting question, if something is going to be done, which country is liable to do it first? That's at least why I asked the question.
I think that Alex can speak to this as well as Gary, who were both debaters in prior years in the National High School Debate League of China's tournaments, where we actually debated on environmental protection versus economic development. I think it's pretty true that in China, the climate change is kind of accepted as a fact rather than an opinion or an active debate. The fact of climate change is very much not up for debate in China, whereas it seems like that question is a bit more open in the U.S. I don't know, Alex, do you have any thoughts on sort of the discussion of the protection of the environment in China?
Well, like personally, I certainly think that American government is doing a better job. But wait a second. Chinese government, let's just consider the history of China. Like, you can consider China as a thousands of years old man, or you can consider like it's only about 60 years old. It's a matter of age. It's a matter of concepts like standards of development, right? Like we can see back in like 1860s, where British has this industrialization revolution or something. Like I was back in 2010, and I was like Expo. And there is a bottle of air back in those days, it's totally black. Like I think China is still like a growing teenager. Like we are going to do better, but there is still a long way to go.
Well, I really want to jump in on this reception of climate change in China and the States. Like just as David just mentioned, in China, climate change is accepted as a fact. But here, when I first came here, I remember last year when I audited, I think, a meeting of the Party of the Right at Yale. And there came this guy who was also my classmate in directed studies, and he started making lengthy speeches about how this idea of climate change is just a propaganda trick or a joke or a kind of conspiracy theory of all climate change scientists and people on the left side of the political spectrum to make money out of you, to make a fool out of you. So I guess this is really a fundamental difference, because in China, of course, it's very complicated why the Chinese people are more willing to accept this idea. You can say because in China, there are not as many different opinions as there are in the U.S. because the civil society is not as well developed. But I guess also because in the U.S. when you have a more developed tradition of liberalism, when people really put a lot of emphasis on personal liberty, it's just so much harder to persuade people that now you're facing something that you have to make sacrifices. You have to do it collectively. You have to stop using cars. You have to, probably not that extreme. You have to use cars less. You have to use refrigerators less. It's just very, very difficult in American culture. I guess this is just like one of my superficial comments. I don't know.
I think it's interesting that you bring up the fact that people like to talk about it, but then as soon as they're asked to make changes to their daily lifestyle, it becomes very difficult. Especially, I mean, this is obviously an extreme example, but I grew up in Los Angeles, and it's very much in fashion to buy these expensive bags that are indications that you're a big protector of environmental rights. But as soon as you're asked to cut your shower times, then people run away as if there's fire. So it's very interesting. I agree, like in the United States, that there's this spectrum of people that say that they're strong advocates of these environmental rights, but then many people are very much congregated in the demographic where people aren't willing to make real changes that will affect them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that in the United States, the fact that there is an active discussion about climate change still, and the fact that it's open for debate, I mean, I think it probably indicates that the political spectrum in the United States is perhaps a little bit more polarized than it is than what we see in China. I think in China there's widespread sort of consensus about the function of government, about the relationship between the citizen and the state, where it's government's responsibility not only to work for people, but also in a lot of cases to make decisions on behalf of people. And I think that on the other hand, in the United States, and I think Gary was getting to this, that we have a much more sort of a much more developed conception of liberalism and individual autonomy, and that there's sort of this active debate about whether or not it's okay for the government to to what degree is it acceptable for the state to impede upon individual people's liberty, their freedom to drive their SUV that gets 2 miles per the gallon or something on the road for as long as they like. So I think that it probably indicates that the United States has a more polarized sort of political spectrum, and I think that probably is an outcome of kind of our political tradition. And I think ultimately you have to look at political theory in order to see really the origins of this this really wide gulf.
Well, maybe we'll throw it open to you all, and just to remind you, we don't need to simply talk about the topic, but I think any of you have questions about, to pursue a little further, this idea of the role of sort of a dialectical debate process in each society, which I think is quite different, and what the experience of our debaters has been in China and now being here. Anyone have any questions or thoughts? And we should include the people who are in this debate who are not at the table.
Isn't pollution in the traditional sense a function of basically wealth, in that rich countries can afford to clean up and poor countries can't while they develop? Whereas climate change is an issue of technology. We'd all love to live in a carbon-free world, but we really don't know how to do it quite yet.
Any response?
Yeah, I mean, I think that in China, very often the response to these sorts of accusations of, China's irresponsibly polluting, or, there's just too much industrial output and of carbon in China. The response oftentimes, I think, is, it's very easy for Denmark or the United States that has GDP per capita of around $50,000 per person to say that, we're very naughty for polluting, right? On the other hand, if you had told, I think Gary brought this up earlier, and I think it's, quite powerful that in the 1950s, London had a terrible pollution issue. Throughout the late 19th century, Great Britain as well as the United States were polluting and emanating just as much, either physical hazardous pollutants or just raw carbon. But I think. Also, more to the point, we live in a globalized world, and in fact, our debate delegation from China was debating about globalization and the interaction with poverty reduction. So I think it's important to bear in mind when we're talking about environmental policy in China that China isn't just Chinese factories aren't just making toys for Chinese children. They're making toys for the entire world, right? So in a lot of ways, I think that one of these sorts of really persistent issues when we talk about environmental protection in China is basically the place where much of the world's pollution has been outsourced because of labor costs and because of the regulatory climate. So maybe that's like something that's really important to keep in mind, because I think that ultimately these sorts of discussions about the environment aren't really productively used to castigate one country or another, but maybe to understand the incentives, the drives, the systems that create the realities that we see.
I think what made this debate so difficult was that actually civil society and government are inextricable partners in any remedy to any of the kinds of problems we've been discussing, indeed maybe for almost all problems, and that what makes it so complicated is that sometimes it needs to be civil society that takes the lead, and sometimes it needs to be government that takes the lead. And so you can't argue it in an abstract way. Comments, thoughts, questions from the rest of you? How about from some of our Chinese debate visitors? What have you all made of being on this tour to America? You can't hide behind the fact that you can't speak English.
So about the pollution problem, I think that I kind of agree with the previous two. I think that it's about the development of country. I mean, a country develops first, it has to be agricultural, then it has to be industrializing, and finally it becomes service leading. So America today is kind of service leading country. It has already been industrialized, and China is still in its industrializing period. So I think that the pollution problem is the most important when a country is in the industrializing period, where China is now. And when a country is in the industrializing period, like England and America in 1920s, the Chicago pollution problem, I think that most countries will suffer from such problem. But after a country goes through industrializing period to service leading, I think that it will be kind of solved. So I think that in 2050, when China's developed enough, I think that the pollution problem in China will not be so severe today. Yeah.
I have to jump in here. I think I'm kind of misunderstood. I'm definitely not saying that China should be excused for what it's doing in polluting the environment because it's not well developed enough. What I'm saying is that we have to be calm when we're analyzing the issue, but when we come to the end of the day, when we are facing a problem that is endangering the survival of all the creatures living on this planet, you are not a developed country is definitely not an excuse whatsoever for not trying your best in protecting the environment. Like, what are we talking about? We're talking about like millions of people probably being submerged by rising sea levels. We're talking about problems in ocean currents. We're talking about all these mass extinction in species. And now you're saying China is not well developed enough, so China should be somehow excused from this protection process? No, definitely. But what I'm saying is that we need to, on the one hand, try our best to protect the environment, but on the other hand, we need to take into account of the circumstances. Yeah, so yeah, I think I need to clarify my point here.
Yeah, I got a additional point, right? So I think today's these executions, accusations are not the most important issue for today. It's like, we all know there's a concept of latecomer advantage, right? So like China, when they're developing their industry, they have additional technology without the procedure of research. So they have industrial scrubbers, which is crucial to the air pollution problem. We are working on that, and we got in Malaysia, we got India, and all those developing countries have this latecomer advantage. They just have to utilize it. Yeah, but that kind of involves to another problem. It's race to the bottom. Yeah, so even if you have this advantage, there is a competition between these industrialized world countries. That seems like much more to the point. How do they balance the technology point and the race to the bottom point? Yeah.
Now I see we're after 8 o'clock here, but maybe there's one more question we could throw at the panel. How about the woman right in the tan jacket there? Yeah.
Hi. I was just wondering if you feel, I know one of the things that helped to move the anti-pollution or the environmental movement forward in this country was that people felt free to speak up and act locally and protest. I mean, I know when I was in elementary school, my friends and I decided to picket outside a local factory because they were dumping things in the river behind, and we saw it when we went fishing, and we saw the things floating in the water, and so we got all our friends together and we had a little picket line out there, and we felt really free to do that in this country. And, I think that a climate where dissent is allowed and where people can speak up and, and say what they think about what's happening around them was really important in moving that dialogue forward here. Do you feel that a climate exists where it's possible to have that kind of free exchange of ideas in China?
I'd like to add to that. I think that this culture where you feel comfortable expressing dissent. I think that in large part, I think that starts not when you turn 18 and are eligible for voter registration and you go to the local fire station and turn in a card. I think that starts in the classroom, and I think that ultimately. Activities like debate, public speaking, things like this. I think that particularly for Western countries, America would like to see a China that has a more open society. How politically that manifests itself, I think that we have differing opinions on. But I think that we would all like to see a more open China that's open to other ideas, that's open to internal disagreement and discourse inside of China. But I think that activities like debate or public speaking are particularly important, not because they impart a particular conception of the good or a particular political system upon people, but instead because they're just vehicles or tools like the scientific method that are completely agnostic to a conclusion, but instead are just a way to arrive at a conclusion. So for example, debate is a method of rhetoric. It's a way of getting at a point. So I think that activities like debate or public speaking, speech, entrepreneurship simulation, I think things like these ultimately give young people in China the intellectual and rhetorical tools that they need to be able to become active citizens and leaders in their own country.
When we come to the end of the day, it's really about which China we're talking about. Are we talking about China in the past, which is isolated from the world, which doesn't have mature democratic institutions? Are we talking about China at present, with an emerging middle class, with more and more liberality in politics? Or are we talking about a China in the future where people who grew up under a cosmopolitan education, where a lot of people can speak 2 or more than 2 languages, will take charge of the second largest economy in the world with the largest population in the world? So yeah, I definitely agree with what the lady just talked about. In China, people are not allowed to voice dissent as freely as they are in America. And that, sadly, is still a fact at present. But I believe that as time goes by, globalization is an inevitable and irreversible process for all countries in this world. And I have confidence that things will turn better. Yeah.
Well, listen, I think we've reached the end of our allotted time. So on behalf of the Asia Society, I want to thank all of our panelists, debaters, and thank all of you who came on this trip and who've been to Penn, I gather, and Harvard, and now here. I hope you've had an interesting time, and we hope you'll come back sometime soon. Thanks very much.